heart of Uwheru stood a tree that could speak the truth of the ancestors. It revealed secrets, delivered justice, and carried the voices of the dead. But when its voice vanished, the village fell into chaos. One only dared journey to awaken it. She faced spirits, betrayal, and the keeper of the secrets to restore the voice of her people. This is the legend of courage, truth, and the Talking Tree of Uwheru. Will you dare to listen?
Whispers from the creeks.
In the days when the Niger Delta's river ran clear and the forest stood thick with ancient trees, there was a place called Uwheru. The village lay at the edge of a winding creek, where the mangrove clung to the water like black fingers, and the air smelled of palm wine and wood smoke. Tall raffia palms swayed above the thatched roofs, and the call of the agadagba bird echoed across the water at dawn. Uwheru was no ordinary settlement. Its people were fishermen, farmers, and traders, their canoes gliding down in the great market of Ewu and Patani. Yet, above all, they were known for guarding a mystery, a tree unlike any other. At the heart of the village square rose the Okpara-Ukodo, the talking tree. Its roots were as thick as a man's waist, its bark furrowed like the skin of an elephant, and its crown spread wide enough to shade an entire gathering. The elders said it stood there before Uwheru was ever founded. Some claimed it grew from a staff planted by the first king. Others swore it was a bridge between Erewin, the spirit world, and the land of the living. But all agreed on one thing: Okpara-Ukodo could speak. Not in the way men speak, with lips and tongues, but in a voice that rumbled from deep inside its trunk, carrying words like the wind carried the scent of rain. Sometimes it spoke to warn, sometimes to judge, and always its truth cut sharper than a warrior's sword. That season, the Hamadan wind had just begun to kiss the land with its dry breath. In the evenings, the people gathered in the square, drinking fresh palm wine and sharing stories under the tree's vast shadow. Amongst them was Omasiri, a young palm wine tapper with keen eyes and a restless spirit. He loved to linger near the tree, leaning on his tapping pole, listening to his whisper. What he did not know was that before the next moon waned, the talking tree would call his name, and nothing in Uwheru would remain the same. The night was heavy with the scent of burning palm kernels, and the slow wind carried the soft hiss of the river beyond the mangroves. Omasiri lingered in the village square long after the other men had staggered home from the palm wine gathering. The moon, a pale crescent, hung low above the Okpara-Ukodo, bathing his back in silver light. He leaned his tapping pole against the tree and rested his hand on its trunk. The wood felt warm, as though it held the day's heat inside it. He closed his eyes, listening to the night, the distant splash of fish in the creek, the rustle of palm fronds, the cry of a night heron. Then it came, a deep, resonant hum, so low he felt it in his bones before he heard it in his ears. At first, he thought it was the wind, but the sound thickened, shaping itself into words in the old Urhobo tongue, the kind only elders used during rituals. Omasiri, son of Onoruwe, the shadows come. Guard your hands from blood and your feet from the path of strangers. His eyes flew open, his breath sharp in his chest. The tree's bark rippled beneath his palm as if it has taken a living breath. He stumbled back, nearly tripping over his tapping pole. Ogene, he whispered, invoking God. Did I hear you? The tree was still again, its massive roots coiling into the earth like sleeping serpents. The village was silent, save for the nightly insects. Yet the words paused in his mind as if carved there. The shadows comes. By morning, Omasere could no longer keep the experience to himself. He sought out Adolo, the oldest priestess in Uwheru, whose face was a map of deep wrinkles and whose voice carried the weight of generations. When he told her what the tree had said, Adolo's eyes narrowed like the mouth of a clay pot. She took his hands and whispered, Omasere, the Okpara-Ukodo, does not speak without reason. Shadows do not always fall from the sun. Sometimes they rise from the ground beneath our feet. And in that moment, Omasere understood. Whatever was coming for Uwheru had already begun its journey. Before the cock crowed, the air in Uwheru was already thick with the smell of burning incense. Omasere followed Adolo through the narrow footpath leading to Ure, the sacred grove where only the initiated could walk freely. The forest canopy here was dense, and sunlight entered only in thin, trembling shafts. At the grove's heart stood a small shrine built in red earth and palm fronds. Cowrie shells glinted in the dim light, and carved wooden figures, some with human faces, others half man, half beast, stared from the shadows. The priestess knelt before them, white wrapper tied across her chest, her silver hair coiled like silver snails. She began to chant. Her voice, low and rhythmic, rose and fell with the rustling of the leaves, calling upon the spirits of Uwheru, the land of the ancestors. She sprinkled gin on the earth, poured palm oil into a clay bowl, and held up a white kola nut as if offering it to the unseen. The air shifted. The forest seems to lean in closer. When Adolo finally turned to Masere, her eyes were strange, glassy, as though she was looking past him into a place he could not see. The shadows is not a man alone, she said slowly, her voice echoing in the stillness. It is a hunger. It walks with the feet of a stranger, but feeds on the heart of our own. Omasere's brow furrowed. Stranger? But Uwheru is far from the war roads. Who could come here? Adolo crushed the kola nuts between her palms, letting the pieces fall into the clay bowl. The talking tree has shown you because your hands are still clean. But mark this, Omasere, when the shadows come, truth will be buried in lies, and even the king will not know friend from foe. The leaves overhead whispered like conspirators. A gust of wind swept through the grove, scattering the ash from the incense into the air. Adolo stood, her wrapper billowing. Go, tell no one else. The time will come when the Okpara-Ukodo will speak again, and its word will either save Uwheru or bring it to ruin. Omasere felt a shiver travel down his spine. Somewhere deep in the village, a drum began to beat, slow and deliberate, like the heartbeat of a coming storm. The village square of Uwheru was alive with tension that morning. Traders had closed their stalls. Fishermen left their nets on the riverbank, and even the children were kept indoors. Word had spread like bushfire. A land dispute between two respected families had reached the ears of Ovie Oroto, king of Uwheru, and the matter would be judged beneath the Okpara-Ukodo itself. The accused and accusers stood facing each other before the great tree. On one side was Urhobo, a farmer whose yam field bordered the creeks. On the other was Onosode, a wealthy palm wine merchant. Urhobo claimed that Onosode's men had shifted boundary markers in the night, stealing a strip of fertile land. Onosode swore by Ogene that the land had always been his. The king arrived in a procession, his wrapper of fine indigo cloth trailing behind him, coral beads heavy on his neck. Behind him came the Oto, the council of elders, their walking sticks stomping the ground in unison. They took their places beneath the wide branches, their eyes grave. Tradition demanded that when such dispute could not be settled by men, the Okpara-Ukodo would speak. The king rose, staff of authority in hand, and addressed the tree. O great elder, whose roots drank from the beginning of Uwheru, we call you to witness truth. Let your voice guide us as it guided our fathers. For a long moment, nothing happened. Only the hum of cicadas and the whisper of leaves. Then the trunk of the tree seemed to tremble, and from deep beneath it came the resonant voice, the same that had chilled Omasere's night before. The land belongs to Urhobo, son of Umovie. Onosede's greed blinds his eyes and hardens his heart. Gasp rippled through the crowd. Onosede's face drained of color, his lips trembling. Urhobo fell to his knees in gratitude, bowing low before the king. Uvie Eroto struck the earth with his staff. The matter is finished. Onosede returned the land before the next moon of his exile. The people cheered, praising the wisdom of the talking tree. But Omasere, standing at the edge of the gathering, felt a knot in his stomach. If the shadow Adolo had spoken of was truly coming, then the Okpara-Ukodo's voice, so trusted, so feared, would be the first weapon in the battle of Uwheru's soul. The Harmattan sun hung pale in the sky, its dry breath coating the village in fine dust. Days had passed since the judgment beneath the Okpara-Ukodo, yet the echoes of its voice still stirred whispers in every compound. Women at the well spoke in hushed tones. Children reenacted the trial in their games, and men at the palm wine shed argued over whether the tree's verdict had been too harsh. In the king's compound, the authors sat in a circle beneath a wooden raffia canopy, coral beads clinking as they shifted uneasily. Their leader, Chief Obuma, cleared his throat. My fathers before me honored the Okpara-Ukodo, he began, his voice heavy. But I tell you, we must tread carefully. Each time he speaks, its words bind our hands like the chain of a debt we cannot pay. If the people begin to look to the tree more than the throne, what then becomes of the king's power? Some elders murmured their agreements, others kept silent, staring into the dust. The tree does not speak to honor or shame men, said Elder Urhobo, whose years has bent his back but not his will. He speaks to reveal truth. Are we so afraid of truth? Chief Oboma's eyes narrowed. Truth is a double-edged sword, my friend. Today it cuts on Osode. Tomorrow it may cut the king himself. Meanwhile, in the market square, Onosode's kingsmen muttered darkly. They said the tree had been bewitched by a Fetowo's family. A few even whispered that the voice may not be that of the ancestors at all, but of some Urhobo spirit playing tricks on Uwheru. Omasere heard these murmurs as he carries his calabash of fresh palm wine to a waiting customer. The words itched his ears. He remembered Adolo's warning, truth will be buried in lies. That night he passed the square and looked up at the Okpara-Ukodo's towering silhouette against the moon. For the first time he noticed how its great branches cast shadows across the king's compound. Long reaching shadows, as if the tree itself were touching the heart of Uwheru's power. And deep in the stillness, though no words came, Omasere felt it, watching him. The morning began like any other. The clang of pestles in mortars, the smell of roasted plantain drifting through the air. the laughter of children chasing each other between the huts. But before the sun reached its peak, Uwheru trembled with alarm. The king had been attacked. It happened on the narrow path leading from the palace to the yam field. Uwheru had gone to bless the early harvest when a spear, hauled from the thicket, sliced through the air towards his chest. The king guards were too far to intercept in time. Yet, at that very instant, a deep crack sounded, the sound of wood tearing. A heavy branch from Okpara-Ukodo, which arched above part of the path, broke free and crashed between the king and the spear. The weapon buried itself in the wood instead of the king's flesh. The would-be assassin fled into the forest. Some swore they saw him vanish like smoke. Others said the earth swallowed him whole. By evening, the village gathered at the square. The king stood before the Okpara-Ukodo, his wrapper dark with dust, his coral beads glinting in the dying light. "O great elder," he said, placing his palm on the rough back, "today your shadow shielded my life. I, Eroto, son of Erivo, swear by my blood and by the ancestors that no hand shall harm you while I draw breath. Let this oath bind my reign." He drew a small blade, pricked his thumb, and pressed the blood onto the trunk. The elders and people gasped. A king's blood was no small offering. The three branches rustled, though the evening was still. From deep within came the slow, resonant words. "Your oath is received, Uwheru. Guard me, and I will guard Uwheru. Break it, and the roots shall bear witness against you." A chill swept through the crowd. The king turned to his people, raising his staff. "From this day, the Okpara-Ukodo is under my protection. Anyone who raises a hand against it will face the wrath of the throne and the spirits." Omasiri stood in the shadows, his heart pounding. The bond between the king and the tree had been sealed in blood. But in his mind's eye, he saw again Adolo's warning and wondered what price such an oath might one day demand. The first rains had washed the harmattan dust from the leaves, and the air was heavy with the smell of wet earth. It was on such a morning that a canoe appeared on the wide Uwheru Creek, its prow carved with the head of a crocodile. The man who stepped ashore was not of Uwheru. He was tall, with skin the color of burnt kola nut, and a thin beard like a line drawn with charcoal. His wrapper was of fine woven cloth dyed in deep blue, and at his neck hung brass rings that caught the sun. He introduced himself as Kokori, a trader from the great markets of Abo. His voice was smooth, like palm oil poured into a calabash. His eyes darted constantly, weighing, measuring, calculating. Kokori came bearing gifts for the kings, jars of foreign spices, beads from the coast, and a dagger with a handle of carved ivory. He bowed low before Uwheru, praising Uwheru's strength and beauty. "Your land," Kokori said, "is blessed beyond measure, and yet I hear there is a blessing greater still, a tree that speaks the truth of the ancestors." The king's gaze grew guarded. "The Okpara-Ukodo is not for trade," he said firmly. "Its roots belong to Uwheru, and its words are for her people alone." But Kokori only smiled. "Ufie, I have seen many wonders in my travels. What is a tree compared to the wealth it could bring? Imagine chiefs and kings from far lands coming to pay tribute, strangers pouring gold into your coffers for a chance to hear you speak. Let us make it a treasure for the world." Words of Kokori's proposal spread quickly through the village. Some young men were tempted by the thought of wealth. Others muttered that no stranger should touch what the ancestors has given. That night, Omasiri overheard Kokori in the market square, speaking in low tones to Chief Ogboma. A gift of silver and cowries for you, and perhaps the king will listen to your counsel, Kokori whispered. Omasiri's stomach nodded. The shadow Adolo had spoken of, was it now taking the form of a smiling trader with smooth words and restless eyes? The moon had not risen, and the darkness lay thick over Uwheru like a burial cloth. Even the stars seemed dim, their light swallowed by a strange heaviness in the air. The villagers shut their doors early, their fires burning low. Omasiri could not sleep. Kokori's words and the sight of him whispering to Chief Ubuma gnawed at his thoughts. He decided to walk to the square, hoping the cool night breeze would calm his mind. The Okpara-Ukodo stood in the gloom, his vast shape barely visible. Omasiri laid his hands against his trunk. The wood was warm, almost pulsing beneath his palm. Then came that deep, bone-shaking hum. The voice of the ancestors carried through the roots. Omasiri, they come. The river's teeth are bared. Guard the northern parts before the first cock crows. He pulled away sharply, hearts pounding. Who comes? He whispered, but the tree did not answer. Without wasting time, he ran to Adolo's compound, pounding on the wooden door. The old priestess emerged, her wrapper hastily tied, her eyes sharp despite the hour. When he told her what the tree had said, she frowned deeply. The river's teeth, she muttered, not crocodiles, men, warriors from beyond the creek. Within moments, the village drums began to sound, a deep, urgent rhythm that had not been heard since the last border raids many seasons ago. Warriors armed themselves with spear and shields. Women gathered children into the inner compounds, and the king's guard took position along the northern parts. Before long, shadows emerged from the tree line, men painted for war, their bodies glistening with oil, spears in hand. They belonged to the Okpara people from the upriver, long rivals of Uwheru. Their leader raised his spear, ready to give the signal to charge. But the element of surprise was gone. Uwheru's warriors surged forward with a shout, meeting them in half-light, steels clashing against wood, and the cries of battle shattered the night silence. High above it, the Okpara-Ukodo's branches swayed through, though there was no wind, as if the spirit world itself watched the fight unfold. The square was a storm of shouting and steel. Warriors from Uwheru, bare-chested and fierce, fought beneath the looming shadow of the Okpara-Ukodo, their feet kicking up clouds of dust. The Okpara raiders pushed forward, their war cries sharp as the hiss of snakes. Spears clanged against shields, machetes flashing in the torchlight. Omasiri fought with a borrowed spear, his palms sleek with sweat. The air was thick with the smell of blood and palm oil touches. Somewhere in the chaos, he heard the deep rumble, not from the warriors, but from the ground itself. Okpara-Ukodo was speaking, not in words this time, but in a sound like the cracking of ancient woods. A sudden gust swept through the square, though the night had been still moments before. The tree's branches swayed violently, scattering dry leaves like falling embers. One massive limb tore free, crashing to the earth and crushing two Okpara warriors in mid-strike. The Uwheru men roared in renewed fury, pushing their enemies back. At the front, Urhobo fought with his royal spear, his coral beads rattling with each thrust. For Uwheru, for the ancestors, he shouted. The raiders began to falter. Kokori, the trader, was nowhere to be seen. Some claimed later they saw him slipping through the shadows towards the river. Others whispered he had guided the raiders to Uwheru in the first place. The battle raged until the first pale fingers of dawn reached the treetops. Finally, the surviving Okpara warriors broke and fled into the forest, their shouts fading into distance.